Ladies and gentlemen, the Brit Pack is back. We are here at the Grosvenor Casino in Russell Square, London. Myself and Shamakar Sandhu bringing you something a little bit different for episode number 20 of the show. We are in situ waiting for the televised portion of UFC 206 to get underway. And we've been really looked after, Sandhu. I can't speak highly enough about where we are right now.
It's literally been Christmas come early, as like you said, we've been taken care of. The casino kindly allowed us and provided us with a nice festive 3-course meal, which we politely accepted. And we're royally stuffed at the moment. We've got some Red Bull on the go as we speak. Because it's approaching 1 a.m. and we have a long night of fights ahead of us, and it's actually pretty awesome and pretty cool to be recording an episode of the show, watching a UFC event together here in London, of all places, where typically we're always on the road when we're recording these types of shows. But this is something new, where the Grosvenor Casino in Russell Square is now starting to host these UFC viewing parties, and it's actually worked out quite well tonight because it's been a big night of combat sports action anyway. With Glory, they had a massive heavyweight showdown in Germany. Obviously here, with the British contingent, we had a massive boxing heavyweight fight with Anthony Joshua versus Molina, which literally just wrapped up about 10-15 minutes ago, and of course we've got the big UFC 206 pay-per-view in a matter of hours from now.
It's not a bad way to spend a Saturday night, I've got to be honest with you. Normally, for those overseas listeners, particularly those on the other side of the pond, you guys don't know how lucky you are. It's hard work being an MMA fan on this side of the pond, because invariably the fights are on at silly o'clock in the morning, and tonight's fight card is no exception. This is your normal start time for a UFC pay-per-view. So we have the televised prelims kick off at 1 a.m. UK time. We're about 8 minutes away from that here as we're recording this. The main card kicks off 3 a.m. and we're typically done by about 6:30. Once you factor in the press conference and the fact we have to write up all the bits and pieces afterwards, it's normally 7:30 in the morning. The sun's up by the time we're finished. So being able to get out and about and do this, not in front of the sofa, raiding the fridge every 10 minutes, this is a much more civilised way of going about it. And I'm, as I say, very grateful to the people here at the Grosvenor Casino at Russell Square. They're treating us royally, and we're very appreciative of that. And the reason we're here isn't just for some free grub and a TV screen. It's because this is the sort of thing that I think we want to be encouraging. Getting people together and watching fights together. Watching it on the TV at home is great. Being in the arena is the best thing. So what's the next best thing? Getting a few people together, getting around a few tables, get the beers in, or soft drinks if you're of the teetotal persuasion, and just having a few people around and watching the fights. It makes things a lot more fun, a lot better. Even Dana White said, I think when he was in New York, he did an interview, and the buzz, for the fights in New York was so great that he almost wished that he could watch the fights in a bar. He has the best seat in the house every single time, but he almost yearns for the day that he can go and watch the fights in a bar. So this is kind of like the middle ground. It's not where there is a bar. It's about 8 feet from where I'm sat, but it's surrounds are very nice. You can buy a ticket to these events. I believe they're looking to roll these out more regularly.
Yeah.
They did a very successful one for UFC 205. I believe they've done one or two before them, and we've got one tonight. I'm sure the one for UFC 207 will be very, very popular, and they do a really good deal, Sandhu.
Yeah, it's $8.95. It's called a beer, a burger, and a bet. It's like Ron Seal. It does exactly what it says on the tin. For $8.95, you get a beer, you get a burger, and you get a bet in the casino, which is a pretty good deal. And you get access to the casino in the private viewing party room. There's a massive drop-down screen that's in front of us, just to kind of set the stage. Loads of tables, loads of chairs, great staff. The staff here have been just absolutely fantastic. We even had one of the managers just come by and sit down with us.
Talk fights for 10 minutes.
And she was a massive Conor McGregor fan, wanted to pick our brains a little bit about the sport, which is just great. Great that people that are essentially casual fans of MMA, or perhaps the UFC specifically, but are interested in learning more and finding out more. And it's just great to see the kind of sport grow like that.
It's a difficult sport to get people together for because of the time of day, and getting late licenses is always tricky. So when there's an opportunity like this, it's always really good. So if you are in the London area and you want to give it a go, then feel free to hit us up on Twitter. We can pass on any information that you need for the future events, and maybe this might become a regular thing, and we can start to do a few meetups and get a few of you guys on the show. That would be a fantastic thing. Now, the reason we're here, Sandhu, is UFC 206.
Absolutely.
We just watched Anthony Joshua very quickly knock out Molina to retain his title, and the big story from that, before we move into the UFC thing, he's going to fight Vladimir Klitschko, April 29 at Wembley Stadium. I've never covered a boxing event in person live before. If I was going to break my duck, that would be the one to do it for. That would be something pretty special. But so we've had a bit of a pre-show. We've also had the UFC Fight Pass prelims from Canada. So we've kind of been dual screening. Sandhu's had Fight Pass running on his laptop while we've had the boxing on the big screen. And we've seen 3 fights so far. Dustin Ortiz beaten Zach Markowski by split decision. I thought Ortiz did a better job than that. I thought he won the fight relatively convincingly, but the judges were split. Rustam Habilov took on Jason Sagar and took a unanimous decision, which is what he does. He grinds people out and wins by decision, and called out Kevin Lee, who's immediately responded. That's a fight that needs to be made in 2017. And Lando Venata took on John Makdessi. Makdessi's known for having a good chin, for being a solid striker and being a real tough campaigner, Sandhu. Venata pulled out a trick from Edson Barboza's book. It wasn't quite the visual wow moment that we saw when he knocked out Terry Etienne, but it weren't far short. Spinning heel kick to the chin, and that was it, all done.
Yeah, it was pretty spectacular, and it's a great comeback for Lando Venata. He obviously, lost against Tony Ferguson earlier in the year, which was another cracking fight in itself. But he's a fighter that's got a crap load of potential, and I think he's just shown a glimpse of that tonight. Like you said, fantastic spinning heel kick, completely silenced the Canadian crowd there in Toronto. And, I think Lando Venata is going to be one of these fighters everyone should be keeping a close eye on as we head into 2017.
He's only 24 years of age. He's had 10 fights. And the only loss on that record was that Darce choke submission to Tony Ferguson in a fight that he was looking very good in early on, as you say. But the main thing, 24 years of age, he's got a lot of time left to build things up in his mixed martial arts career. He's got a lot of upside, and he's got one of the best nicknames in MMA, Groovy Lando Venata. So I'm a big fan of that. So there we go. He's in a good spot to really kick on in 2017. Speaking of nicknames, let's very quickly throw back to last night.
Yes.
The Albany fight night, UFC fight night in Albany, New York. I stayed up for it. I'll tell you later whether that was a good move or not from a body clock point of view. Let's kick things off, since we're talking about nicknames. Corey Anderson, formerly known as Corey Beast in 25-8 Anderson, he's now Corey Overtime Anderson, a nickname that was unveiled during the intros before his fight. And he also unveiled a new, very, very mean approach to his fights. There's one accusation that you could have levelled against him in previous fights, is that he kind of did what he needed to do to win, but didn't really do much more on top of that. He put a beating on Sean O'Connell and finished him very impressively. And that's the guy, the light heavyweight division needs contenders. They need new blood, and he looked really good, Sandhu.
Oh well, like I said, you stayed up for the fights last night. I actually did not. I had plans, and it was a Friday night, and I think my wife would have killed me if I spent 2 nights in a row staying up until 5, 6 in the morning. So I actually, had a scan through the results first thing this morning. I saw a few GIFs and videos online with some of the key finishes of the night. But referring back to that particular fight, what Corey Anderson has done now is he's really asserted himself in that light heavyweight division. I'm not sure about the change in nickname, to be honest with you. I think Beast in 25-8 was a massive fan favourite nickname in our little MMA bubble. But let's see, maybe over time will stick in time. But I think everyone will keep referring him to Beast in 25-8 for the time being. But it was a good victory on a card that perhaps didn't have too much of a spotlight on, but it keeps him ticking on, keeps him in that win column, keeps that momentum building. And again, he's someone that everyone should keep a close eye on as he continues to improve his career heading into 2017.
Yeah, 27 years of age. He's 9-2. His only losses were to John Vellante early in his UFC career. I think it was his 3rd fight in his UFC career. And a very controversial split decision loss to Mauricio Shogunhua, a fight that I thought he won down in Curitiba, Brazil. That was his most recent fight before last night. And he looked to have turned the corner last night. He looked very impressive against Sean O'Connell. Obviously, Sean O'Connell not ranked. And Anderson was someone who was already ranked. I think he was ranked number 9 in the world. He needed to put on a decisive performance. He did that. He got the win. John Vellante, who was also on the main card last night, in one of the wildest fights. I know you said you haven't had a chance to go back and watch that card.
Yeah.
If you have a UFC Fight Pass subscription, I strongly advise you, if you did not see last night's fight card, get online when you get a chance and watch John Vellante's light heavyweight scrap with Saparbek Safarov. It was an absolute barn burner of a fight at 205, and it was one of those where you end up looking basically completely knackered yourself after watching it. It was one of those. You really could feel those shots land all the way through the TV set. So that was a good performance from John Vellante, getting a second round TKO finish over Safarov, who's making his debut on very short notice. He come out of it with a lot of credit. The co-main event, Sandhu.
Yes.
Francis Ngannou. We've seen him in close proximity. He's a big, scary heavyweight, and his reputation just continues to rise. And that performance against Anthony Hamilton, first round Kimura. If you had money on that, congratulations. You'd have got some good odds on that. Won the fight in less than 2 minutes. Anthony Hamilton had absolutely nothing for him. Pushed him against the fence. Kimura finish. Bang. No one saw that coming from Francis Ngannou. Where's the ceiling for this guy?
It's funny you mentioned that, because I wrote a piece for Fighters Only on Friday. It was one of my sign-off pieces for the week, and it was a preview of the main and co-main event of the Albany card, and the whole piece was surrounding Derek Lewis and Francis Ngannou being these big power puncher heavyweights who have a crap load of knockout and TKO victories on their record. And if someone had told me Francis Ngannou would be winning by Kimura submission, I wouldn't have believed you. And the fact that he got that done, the immense power of the man to get into that Kimura position from a standing position and then take Hamilton to the ground like that to finish him off is just insane. And he's a mountain muscle of a man. And we were actually talking about how big Anthony Joshua is standing opposite Vladimir Klitschko. Well, Francis Ngannou is a behemoth of a heavyweight, and again, I keep saying it, but I think the Albany card started to showcase some fighters that people should be keeping a really close eye on, and especially in the heavyweight division. All it takes is maybe 3 or 4 big wins, and you can really assert yourself into that top 10 picture.
Yeah, he's 6'4". He's 30 years of age. So he's not a youngster, but he's new to the sport. 6'4". 257 pounds, give or take a few pounds, depending on how he's feeling fight week. That's a touch over 18 stone in English money. And other than his second pro fight, which he lost by decision, it's been wins all the way, and they've all been stoppages. He was riding a 4-fight knockout streak going into Friday night. That one was a submission finish. His first submission finish in the UFC. He looks dangerous, and he also picked up 50 grand as a performance of the night bonus.
Nice.
And deservedly so. He's definitely one to watch. You mentioned there, we're talking about Derek Lewis, Francis Ngannou. Where Francis Ngannou really impressed, Derek Lewis really struggled. And by the end of the fight, if you watched him and you just looked at photographs of him, you'd assume he'd lost. The fact that it was a 5-round fight, Sandhu, saved him, because he lost each of the first 3 rounds to Shamil Abdurakhimov. Did a very unspectacular but very effective job of shutting down Lewis in those opening 3 rounds and giving him very few opportunities to get some of those big heavy hands off. Eventually, after a stern talking to from his corner, because basically every time Lewis threw a low kick, Shamil just caught it, took him down. And even on Twitter, everyone watching it was going, "Why are you throwing kicks? Stop throwing kicks! Stop throwing kicks!" And eventually, I think it was his coach, Bob Perez, in the corner said, "Just stop with the kicks now. No more kicks. Just use your hands. Go after him. No more kicks." And of course, start of the 4th round, he throws a kick, gets taken down. This time he gets back up, and then he starts to throw his hands. And he won the fight by TKO. He eventually got Abdurakhimov on the mat, up against the fence, mounted him, and smashed him until the referee, Dan Mogliotto, I think it was, stopped the fight. It was a win, but it wasn't the big, impressive win that you would have expected against an unranked guy. I think he's ranked 15, Abdurakhimov.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was a pretty big moment for Derek Lewis to main event his very first UFC event, albeit not the sexiest of cards. It's still a main event, and when you're in the headline act, there's an opportunity there to really springboard yourself. Now, you say he's got a win. That's the most important thing. To keep that win streak going, especially in the heavyweight division, is absolute paramount. He was, ranked number 10 going into the fight. I'm sure that'll get him up a few more places. He's still maybe just 1 or 2, wins away from asserting himself into that title contention picture. And he's also been one of the fighters of the year for me, not just with his performances in the octagon, but just his social media interaction with fans and what he's been able to get out there on Instagram and Twitter with his very kind of tongue-in-cheek and comedic posts. It's kind of really endeared him to the MMA community, and it's another way that he's been able to get his personality across, which is again so important as his kind of star continues to rise. But look, I'm sure he'll learn from this experience. I think it's important perhaps for him to have had a fight with a really grappling, wrestling-based fighter like Abdurakhimov, and I'm sure he'll only get better from that experience.
It's going to be very interesting to see what the UFC do with both Derek Lewis and Francis Ngannou. I've seen some people calling for the pair of them to be matched up. I don't know whether that's a wise thing for the UFC to do that, because you've got 2 rising contenders and they need new blood at the top of that heavyweight division. Matching them up against each other immediately eliminates one of them. So I would probably look to keep them apart and put the 2 of them in there against some of the old guard who are maybe ranked above them in that middling, between sort of 4th and 10th in the top 10. Give them someone who, if you beat them, you're not quite a championship contender, but you're maybe 1 fight away. I think that's where they both are.
Right.
I think if you're looking at the pair of them based on their performances on Friday night, you'd definitely be more excited for Francis Ngannou, but Derek Lewis is a dangerous guy, and I don't think he's going to put in a performance quite like that in his next fight. So interesting to see what happens with those 2. That was last night. We'll throw it very quickly forward because the big screen has now got the Sky TV guide on it. They're about to put BT Sport 3 on.
They're about to switch it on, yeah.
We're about to go live with the televised prelims here at UFC 206. That's probably a good time as any to knock this section on the head and come back to you as the fights progress in Toronto.
I suppose the plan for the rest of the night is to kind of jump back in like we have done octagon side, and as soon as there's a big moment in a fight or when fights finish, we'll chip in with our 2 cents, and that'll be the show, and I'm sure we'll wrap things up at the end of the night as well. So the televised prelims are now on the big screen here at the Grosvenor Casino in Russell Square, and I'm looking forward to a fun night of fights.
Mitch Gagnon versus Matthew Lopez is on right now. Valerie Letourneau, Vivian Pereira will be next. Olivier Aubin-Mercier versus Drew Dober will follow, and then the headline prelim fight, one I'm really looking forward to, Nikita Krylov versus Misha Serkinov, will wrap things up. We will probably check in with you after that fight, tee up the main card, and then bring you updates all the way and reaction as we go through the 5-fight main card at UFC 206. Alright, Sandhu, we've had the preliminary card. We had a lot of decisions, but the last 2 fights of the prelim card have teed us up nicely. Olivier Aubin-Mercier getting a nice rear naked choke win over Drew Dober. But we've got to talk about the feature prelim. Misha Serkinov defeating Nikita Krylov by first round guillotine choke. He looked good. He looked really good.
It's just what the light heavyweight division ordered. You know, I think it was great for Serkinov to be able to do that in his hometown of Toronto. Got a great ovation from the crowd. Fantastic performance. He is now 4-0 since entering the UFC. And like I said, it's just what the UFC 205 division needs. And he called out Shogun Rua in his post-fight interview, and it's not a bad matchup in regards to keep the momentum going, to keep building him up. And I think a few more marquee wins with some big names, and he's somebody that you could build up as a potential title challenger down the road.
Absolutely. That's 8 wins on the spin for Misha Serkinov, who is an absolute tank of a 205-pounder. They're big guys, but he is a particularly big guy. I remember he did a Q&A with Josh Barnett. I think it was in Hamburg, Germany. And they were stood next to each other, and they looked like they were the same weight class. He's a terrifyingly large man. He can get down to 205, supposedly quite healthily, and he looked like $1 million in his hometown, as you say. Canada needs more stars. You know, they've been starved of some success, and they've been starved of events. This is a big opportunity for them, and Serkinov getting that big win. He's someone who the UFC could really start to build in a division that really needs some extra talent, as you say. Let's take a look at his main card, where you probably hear Joe Rogan screaming in the background. They're just teeing up the main card, so we will do the same. Jordan Meehan is making his comeback against Emil Meek in the first bout of the main card. Really interested to see this one, Sandhu. Meek, there's a fair amount of hype behind this guy, but one thing that he is coming into the octagon with is slightly less facial hair.
Yes, the Ontario Commission made him trim his trademark Valhalla Viking-esque beard yesterday, citing issues that could potentially cause the beard to be pulled and plucked and all sorts during a fight.
That always happens in fights.
Exactly, and you think of other fighters like Roy Nelson, who's got probably a Santa Claus-esque beard, who's able to fight with that. So a strange decision there by the Ontario Commission. It's still a fascinating beard in terms of how, in terms of beard standards, and I'm sure it'll grow back fairly quickly. But that was a big talking point yesterday. But that aside, Emil Meek is coming in to this UFC debut with a lot of hype and potential. Earlier on this year, he got a trademark marquee win against Josime Palhares on the Venator card in Italy. So out of the main card, he is the big European hopeful that's looking to do some big things there.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing him making his UFC debut on the world's biggest stage, on a main card of a pay-per-view event, no less, as well. That's a big stage for him to really make an impression. Following that will be a middleweight bout between Tim Kennedy and Kelvin Gastelum. Now, both of these guys were due to take part at Madison Square Garden at UFC 205. Kennedy at middleweight against Rashad Evans. Gastelum at welterweight against Donald Cowboy Cerrone. Kennedy did not fight because Rashad Evans didn't pass the medicals. Gastelum didn't fight because he couldn't make weight.
Yep.
So the UFC had told Gastelum, your days at trying to fight at 170 are done. You need to move up and start fighting at 185. I think that's a sensible move. Giving him Tim Kennedy is one hell of a test to start off with. I think this is a really, really close fight, but my money's on Kennedy. I mean, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think so too. I just think, Kennedy seems to be the fighter of the two that has more determination to do something and prove something. I mean, the only reason he came out of his self-imposed retirement was to fight on the biggest stage in Madison Square Garden at UFC 205. But now he's got a different mission. He's part of the MMA AA, the the Mixed Martial Arts Athletes Association. I think now his mission in regards to being a professional mixed martial artist is to almost preach that message, and one of the best ways he can do that is by being able to fight on the biggest stage possible for the UFC. And it'll be interesting to see, if he wins, how he uses that post-fight interview time slot to perhaps get some sort of message across there. But in terms of the actual fight itself, I'm picking Kennedy to win as well.
I'm almost wondering whether we might see something from the walkout. I've got to be honest, they show the walkouts on the pay-per-view. It's not something that the UFC can cut away from or leave out, whereas a post-fight interview can be skipped over. So, will we see Tim Kennedy walk out in a Reebok fight kit? Maybe.
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
Will that Reebok fight kit be unaltered in any way? Maybe.
Maybe not.
We might see some black tape here and there. We might see a hat that perhaps the UFC officials weren't expecting. I'm expecting something. They certainly alluded to the fact that something might happen involving Tim this weekend. To the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been anything yet. But this is the big stage right now. This is the opportunity for him to make a bit of a statement. So keep an eye. We will be keeping an eye out for that as the night progresses. The middle fight on the main card is probably the fight I'm most excited about, Sandhu. Cub Swanson, who has long been a favourite of mine. He's a real stylist at 145 pounds. He's a lovely guy as well. He's got the best personal brand in mixed martial arts, in my opinion, with the whole killer cub motif. I really love what he's doing with that. But he's taking on the Korean superboy, Do Ho Choi. He really is a superstar in the making. That's going to be a dynamite fight at 145.
Absolutely, and it's almost, I think it's almost 4 years to the day since the Korean Zombie fought in Toronto, and now we've got the Korean Superboy. So Korea has got some fantastic talent, and they seem to always want to fight in Canada, which is fantastic.
It's going to be interesting to see, can Do Ho Choi rack up another knockout win? We're about to get the fights underway. We will very quickly touch on Donald Cerrone takes on Matt Brown at welterweight. Cerrone is the biggest favourite on this fight card. If you're a gambling man, I think there's some value in backing Matt Brown. And we've been playing around with the Verdict MMA app today, put our predictions on there. You can bet loyalty points, effectively, or experience points, I think they're called.
Yep.
The big gamble that I've gone for, the big outsider I've picked Matt Brown to win it. Did I pick him to win by stoppage? I think I picked him to win by third round stoppage. But I think he's being overlooked a little bit in this fight. Cerrone is in the form of his career, make no mistake. But Brown is a legit welterweight. Big, strong. He's not been in the best form of late, but if he comes into this fight in any kind of shape, I think he can give Cerrone some real issues in this fight. Exciting fight. I mean, how do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm officially picking Cerrone to win by first round knockout or TKO. I think he's just had a phenomenal year, especially rebounding from that really abysmal performance against RDA last December, which was a title fight. It's something that he's been longing for such a long time. And I think if he wins tonight, he's in the running for one of the comebacks of the year, having moved from lightweight to welterweight and racking up 4 wins on the trot if things go his way later on tonight. But I'm picking Cerrone to win by first round knockout TKO. That's my official pick on the Verdict MMA app, like you mentioned. And a quick shout out in regards to the app. We're both going to be using it throughout this main card, where essentially this new app that's become available recently allows you to be a judge. Essentially giving you 60 seconds after every round finishes. It prompts you to give your score like a judge has 6 seconds to submit their round by round score. So it's a fascinating new app, and we'll see what kind of metrics it can provide post fight.
Yeah, it's going to be good fun to play around with as we go through the fights tonight. Very quickly, we'll obviously talk about this in more depth as we get a bit nearer. Main event, Max Holloway, Anthony Pettis, was due to be an interim featherweight championship fight. It still is an interim featherweight championship fight if your name's Max Holloway. Anthony Pettis missed weight by £3, came in at 148. That was the best he could muster, and he's basically fighting in some sort of survival mode at this point. If Pettis wins, he gives the UFC a major headache. What happens to the interim belt? What happens to Jose Aldo in terms of his next fight? It throws everything up in the air. Max Holloway wins, everything lines up nicely. Are we going to see confusion, or are we going to see order at the end of this fight, Sandhu?
Well, it's something that we actually spoke about on last week's show, wasn't it, Simon? And it's the idea that I presented where I wasn't too confident on Anthony Pettis at featherweight initially to begin with, and unfortunately I hate to kind of be right in a situation like this because I'm a massive fan of Pettis, and I really genuinely thought if he can make 145 on the mark, that he could be a real threat and danger in this division. But it's proven to be a massive challenge for him to do it. And I was already picking Max Holloway going into this fight. The fact that Pettis has had challenge or adversity dropping down and his body essentially gave out on him, to go into a 5-round fight with a career featherweight Max Holloway just gives me much more confidence that I think Holloway is going to get the job done tonight.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. I think Holloway was my pick before the fight anyway. But Pettis, particularly with the issue with the weight cut, you've got to think he's been a little bit depleted and he's not going to come in 100%. Now you may, in the background, just about be able to hear the dulcet tones of Mr. Bruce Buffer, Esquire. He is announcing the participants of the very first fight on the main card: Jordan Meehan versus Emil Meek, who I have to say has got rather more facial hair than I thought he'd have. He's still got a healthy-looking beard. He's just had a bit of a tidy.
Yeah,
he's had a bit of a tidy. Is his performance going to be tidy? We're going to find out, and we will get back to you as the night progresses, as we run through the main card here at UFC 206. First fight in the books, Sandhu, and it's a decent fight. Emil Meek picking up his debut win in the UFC and winning a lot of fans in doing so as well. I thought he might win by first round knockout. That was my prediction. Typically I got that wrong, but he picked up the win nonetheless. Great performance though against Jordan Meehan.
Yeah, that first round was a bit of a slobber knocker. It was back and forth, action-packed stuff there. I had him pegged for a first round knockout win as well, and I thought he was going to get it with a flying scissor kick of sorts. He just missed and hit the cage instead there in the first round. But as I was kind of saying to you, as the fight was wrapping up, it's just so important to get that first win in the UFC under your belt, so you can just move on and crack on from there. And just gave an amazing quote in his post-fight interview with Joe Rogan, where he essentially said, and I quote, "My jaw is fucked, my rib is cracked, but I'm freaking awesome, man." So I think he is Valhalla ready, Simon. What do you think?
A star is born, I think.
Yeah.
I think a star is born. I think social media are going gaga over him already, and rightly so. And he's a European personality-driven fighter as well. He's as hard as nails. He's got a win over Rousimar Palhares. You don't beat a guy like that unless you've got some serious credentials. He's then taken it up into the UFC, taken on a guy who's been in the sport for a long time in Jordan Meehan. Granted, he's been out of the sport for a little while, but he's a seasoned operator, and he dealt with him really well. Really impressive performance from him. Great start to the night for Emil Meek. Coming up next, Tim Kennedy versus Kelvin Gastelum, and they're just showing the UFC rankings up on the screen right now, and Tim Kennedy's just in there in that top 10. So where does he go from here? He's got to try and leapfrog a few. He's fighting below himself. Kelvin Gastelum moving into the division. It's a fight with not a lot of upside for Tim Kennedy, but I think this is an opportunity. He hasn't fought for 27 months, Sandhu. His last fight was a very controversial loss to Yoel Romero, and we now know that Romero is the number 1 contender for the middleweight title. Yeah. Kennedy could have won that fight under different circumstances if the stall hadn't been in the cage as long as possible. There was a lot of shenanigans going on from the Yoel Romero corner. But Romero won that fight, and we haven't seen Tim Kennedy since. He is back. He takes on Kelvin Gastelum, and I'm looking forward to seeing this one.
The UFC middleweight division is a much better place when you have Tim Kennedy involved. He's such a great personality, he's a fantastic fighter, but there will be some question marks to see if he does have some cage rust. That is a real thing, and like you said, 27 months away from the octagon, we'll find out in just a matter of minutes if that's going to be a factor in tonight's fight.
Yeah, exciting stuff. At middleweight, 185, Kelvin Gastelum up into the middleweight division, and the two fighters are just about to enter the arena now. We will join you at the conclusion of this one here on the Brit Pack. Oh, lordy, 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 what did we just see?
Jesus effing Christ, Simon. What did we just witness there?
Cub Swanson and Do Ho Choi just put on. I know people use the phrase fight for the ages every now and again, and it can get a bit overused. That might just be one of the greatest MMA fights I've ever watched.
And that's, I said it in my tweet, that isn't hyperbole. That is not hyperbole. That is one of the greatest fights I've ever seen. It's going to go down as one of the greatest MMA fights of all time. I thought initially we might be looking at a round of the year. That's fight of the year, Simon. That is fight of the year, done and dusted. There's nothing that's going to even come close to topping that. Absolutely not.
No, I tweeted halfway through the first round saying, this is the half round of the year. Or was it the second round? This is the half round of the year. And then second half of the round, I'm upgrading it. This is the round of the year. And then by the end of it, we were all saying fight of the year, and then by the time the fight had finished, it was like, no, this is the fight of forever. This is the single most ridiculous fight. If you can ever grab a non-fan and sit them in front of one fight and say, this is why we love mixed martial arts. Yep. This is why we sit down in front of our TV screens until stupid o'clock in the morning. It's for fights like that. Cub Swanson, Do Ho Choi. If I was wearing a hat, I would doff it to you both. Swanson gets the decision, 30-27 twice, 29-28 on the third card. Do Ho Choi has a chin made out of iron. I have no idea. Some of those shots he took in that fight, Sandhu, ridiculous. But yet Swanson literally was seconds to go. Dropped him, finally. And looked like he might even get the finish. Didn't quite get the finish. Went to the cards. Swanson deservedly won. And quite within his rights in his post-fight interview, told the watching public, don't ever question me again. I'm not questioning him again after that. And Do Ho Choi just he said, because that was his second career loss. I think he lost in like his second fight. And he said, this is what losing feels like. I'm going to train even more, and I'm not going to lose again. Unbelievable fight, Sandhu. I'm running out of words, mate.
The entire MMA community right now online is just exploding with all sorts of superlatives to try and describe and sum up their feelings and emotions of what we just witnessed over the last 15 or 20 minutes or so. It really is one of the rare moments in this sport where things just come together. You think a fight's going to end. Both men had just amazing chins. Didn't go out completely cold. Found the grit and the determination, the heart to withstand the punishment. It almost reminds me of the Diego Sanchez, Gilbert Melendez flurry towards the end of their fight a couple of years back. Yeah. But the entire fight was like that.
As I say, we're watching this in a casino. There's probably about 15 or 20 of us all sitting here. There's one guy crashed out on a table. But other than that, everyone is absolutely wide awake. And there was an awful lot of shouting, a lot of it coming from you, I have to say, Mr. Sandhu. It was amazing. We were on our feet at points. At one point it looked like Swanson had Choi in trouble, and it looked like the fight was going to be done. Then out of nowhere, Choi would come roaring back. I don't think I've ever seen a fight that ebbed and flowed and looked close to being finished as many times as that. Do Ho Choi is young, he can come back from this. Cub Swanson could not afford to lose that fight. He knew that, and he laid it all out there, and he won the fight. And all credit to him, one of the real nice guys of the game. Yep. For those of us who've been fortunate enough to meet him and chat to him, he's just a lovely, lovely guy. And everyone, because Do Ho Choi is such a likeable character, all of the goodwill seemed to be going his way. And Swanson was almost like the bad guy coming into this, which really doesn't fit his personality at all. He went out there, he proved everybody wrong, he won the fight. And deservedly so. But boy, what a fight, Sandhu. And as if we're waiting for a bit of a lull. We got Cowboy Cerrone versus Matt Brown next, co-main event, and those two know how to win a post-fight bonus. They've got some work cut out for them if they want to win a bonus tonight.
They absolutely do, and we haven't even touched on the fight previous to Swanson and Doo Ho Choi, which was Kelvin Gastelum, who put on an amazing performance against Tim Kennedy and really made him look like an old and aged fighter in the octagon tonight. But I just can't help but try and stay on the topic of this Swanson-Doo Ho Choi fight, and I think with Swanson now, he had a couple of back-to-back defeats not too long ago against Max Holloway and Frankie Edgar. And I think everyone was kind of writing him off, and I think he summed it up best in his post-fight interview, Joe Rogan, by saying, "Never question me again," as he walked off. What a statement! What he's done now is he's got back onto winning ways. He's put a streak together of 3 wins in a row. Now, depending on what happens later on tonight, is it totally out of the question, Simon, given that performance, given what we just witnessed, if Anthony Pettis beats Max Holloway and Jose Aldo is looking for an opponent to defend his championship against, it's a rematch that Swanson's wanted for a very, very long time, back from the WEC days. Could we perhaps see Aldo versus Swanson in the near future?
That would be a really interesting fight, especially if you put it on in Brazil. Because I think you might struggle to sell it in America on the basis that it was a decisive, quick knockout victory first time round for Jose Aldo. But Cub Swanson, that arguably is the best performance of his UFC career. He's put in some good performances in the past, but he had his back against the wall. He was in there against a young contender who hadn't lost a fight in 6 years and was on a string of first-round knockouts. And he went in there and he put on a show. Amazing, amazing performance. And you did just touch on it very briefly. And we should mention it a little bit more. Kelvin Gastelum versus Tim Kennedy. 2 talking points from this fight. Number 1, Gastelum looked fantastic at 185 pounds.
Yep.
Kennedy looked like someone who hadn't fought for 2 and a bit years. Started fast, started well. Gastelum found his feet and won the fight decisively by TKO stoppage in the 3rd round. The thing that came after that was his post-fight interview, saying all the right things, and then he said he wants to go back down to 170 pounds. And I don't know how many people you guys follow on the social media sphere in terms of MMA journalists and people like that, but almost a chorus of
it was universal, Simon.
People going, "No, don't do that. That's a bad move. That's a bad move."
Yep.
Rather than deplete himself to fight at 170, I think he should really build on his frame and become extra strong at 185. He's a beast at 185, and if he really commits himself to that weight division, he can be a serious contender as a UFC middleweight. But the fighters are now on their way to the prep point. Matt Brown is having a Vaseline applied to his eyebrows right now. He's taking on Donald Cowboy Cerrone in our co-main event. As I just said a minute ago, both of these guys, no stranger to the post-fight bonus column. They're going to have to put on one hell of a fight to even come close to matching what we just saw between Cub Swanson and Doo Ho Choi. But we will see them have a jolly good go at it next. That is our co-main event. Donald Cerrone, Matt Brown, and we'll talk to you once it's done.
We can't stop smiling, Simon, ear to ear, mate.
I'm honestly, it is 5:20 on the morning of Sunday the 11th of December, and we are currently watching one of the most spectacular nights of fights I can remember.
Yep.
We saw Doo Ho Choi and Cub Swanson produce arguably the greatest fight of all time, and we joked that Matt Brown and Donald Cerrone had a little bit to make up to in order to just even come close to that fight.
Yeah.
They did a pretty good job. Back and forth stuff. Both men hurt in that fight. And possibly knowing that he wasn't going to get a fight at the night bonus, Donald Cerrone decided to go a different route and absolutely laid out Matt Brown like a patio with a huge left high kick, laid him out flat, game over, 3rd round, knockout victory, and this night just... Honest, I'm running out of superlatives. Forget superlatives, I'm running out of words at this point.
Yeah, it's just one of the greatest nights of fights I've ever witnessed. I mean, we were talking about it a little bit earlier. It's going back to even some of the boxing that we saw, and I know that you watched some of the Glory even earlier before that, the kickboxing. But this UFC 206 main card, I think it might go down. It probably will go down as the event of the year, definitely the main card of the year. That Cerrone Brown fight was spectacular, and on any other night, it would probably get a fight of the night.
No doubt.
And it's only because Doo-Ho Choi and Cub Swanson just put on one of the greatest fights of all time that they probably won't get that bonus check. But just to focus on Cerrone for a second here, what a great comeback spin for him. We were talking about it earlier on. He lost to RDA in that lightweight title fight last December in pretty abysmal fashion. It just didn't even look like a shadow of his normal self, but he's bounced back from that, moved up to welterweight, and he's got 4 wins on the trot now, and I think he's put himself right in the mix in that 170-pound weight class. I know he wants to fight in Denver, which is just around the corner, and I know that Masvidal called him out, and I think Cerrone is going to be very acceptive of that fight. I would love to see that fight, but the actual fight against Brown that we just witnessed right now, that head kick knockout, again, just spectacular. Is Cerrone ever in a boring fight, Simon?
No, I can't remember one. And I've got to be honest, stylistically I love the Masvidal fight, but all due respect to Masvidal, I think Cerrone needs to be fighting higher up the ladder than that. I think a performance like that against a guy who has really been a mainstay in the higher echelons of that welterweight division. It's only been recently that he started to sort of slide. I think Cerrone needs to be in there with a top 5 guy.
Yeah.
I really do. I think that's where he's at right now, and I think he needs the opportunity to get a win against a top 5 guy and get himself into championship contention in 2017. That was a fantastic performance. I have a feeling he might have broken his jaw, or certainly had some serious damage done to his jaw during that fight. He seemed to be holding it a little bit weird during the fight. Matt Brown, I think he might have busted some ribs early on in the fight, was very protective of his lower right hand side, and that left his right hand, the right hand side of his head open for the head kick, and it was one that Cerrone looked for a couple of times during the fight. In that third round, it was only 34 seconds into that third and final round, with the fight pace beginning to slow just a little bit. The window was there for Cerrone to really throw that huge left high kick. Absolutely flattened out Matt Brown, and unbelievable finish to another fantastic fight. So far on this main card, Emil Mek claimed a unanimous decision win in a very entertaining fight against Jordan Meehan. Kelvin Gastelum, 3rd round TKO stoppage of Tim Kennedy. He looked like $1 million. Someone needs to pin him up against a wall and tell him he's fighting at 185 again.
Yeah.
Cub Swanson and Doo-Ho Choi. The fight went to a decision, but who cares? That was for me, the fight of forever for me. It really was. It was unbelievable. Co-main event, Cerrone, Matt Brown, spectacular head kick knockout. And now the tail of the tape is on the screen. Max Holloway, Anthony Pettis, UFC interim featherweight championship on the line for Holloway. If Holloway wins it, he wins it.
Yeah.
If Pettis wins it, he doesn't, and chaos ensues in the UFC featherweight division. Not for the first time.
I think if Pettis wins, there'll be a lot of different opinions from all the experts, as well as the fans, of what everyone thinks the UFC should do next with the featherweight division. I think everyone's going to have a different take on what should be done next, but we're about to find out what the lay of the land might look like over the course of the next 15 to 25 minutes.
Is it going to be showtime for Anthony Pettis, or is Max Holloway going to be blessed with a shot at the undisputed UFC featherweight title? We are going to find out right now as we go to the main event at UFC 206. We are done and dusted. We are sitting here now in an empty function room. It's just you and me, Sandhu, and the credits rolling on the TV behind us. You can probably hear Mike Goldberg reeling off the names as he does at the end of every pay-per-view show. Arguably, and we were just having this discussion before we hit record, arguably the best main card we've seen this year. It's a toss-up between this and 199, and it really is a toss-up. I think two phenomenal main cards and it's one to debate. I think it was certainly in terms of sort of the highest high of the card. I think tonight might have topped it. Overall, maybe 199 might have had a stronger group of fights, but I mean, you can't really lose with either one of those fight cards. Tonight was a little bit special, my friend.
And isn't it funny how both UFC 199 and 206 had kind of like a storyline coming in where it wasn't really pay-per-view offerings that many thought were up to par with what the UFC should be providing the community with. Obviously with 199, it was just prior to UFC 200, and there was a lot of hustle and muscle promotional-wise thrown into that particular card. And I don't think many people were giving Bisping a chance in the Rockhold fight. And again, this card was kind of marred a lot of bad PR in relation to the featherweight title fight. But lo and behold, those are the two cards that we're probably going to be looking back on when we reflect back on 2016 as the two cards of the year, main cards of the year. And yeah, it's a coin flip. If you feel as though UFC 206 was your card of the year, I've got no problem with that. Just like I've got no problem if UFC 199 was your card of the year. For me, I think just because of that Doo-Ho Choi and Cub Swanson fight, which I think I'm going to watch a million times over the course of my lifetime, that for me just edges it for me, because I'm not over it. I mean, we have, before we kind of go into the overall main card, we've got to just talk about the main event we just witnessed. Max Holloway defeats defeats Anthony Pettis by a third round TKO. Anthony Pettis injured and broke his hand with the very first punch he threw on Max Holloway in the first round, but after that it was all Max Holloway really. And that now sets up a unification title fight with Jose Aldo, which he apparently wants in Brooklyn for UFC 208. So your thoughts on that main event, Simon?
I thought Holloway fought very, very, very maturely, very smart. We were live scoring throughout the night on this Verdicts MMA app, which was good fun to do.
Yep.
A lot of people on my Twitter timeline were scoring the first round to Holloway. I know you scored the first round to Holloway. I actually scored it to Pettis. I thought Pettis just did a little bit more in that first round. But from the second round on, it was Holloway bossing the fight. He started steadily and just gradually increased the pressure. Holloway is a pressure fighter. But against a guy who is so dangerous with his strikes as Anthony Pettis, you can't just go walking onto stuff. Holloway paced himself really well, worked his openings, took a round or so to sort of find out what Pettis had for him, tried to work out some of his timing a little bit, and when he got confident to step in, he started stepping in and scoring well. Did well in the second round, won that second round pretty clearly, and then in the third round he really turned it up. And with 10 seconds to go at the end of the round, he hurt Pettis to the body and sent him back, slumped up against the cage, where he was pretty much curled up in a ball. And then Holloway just unleashed a furious fistic flurry, which forced the referee to jump in and finish the fight. Great performance from Max Holloway, very mature performance from Max Holloway. And anybody who's sleeping on him against Jose Aldo is, I think, very foolish. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see Max Holloway take the title away from Jose Aldo in 2017. I think he's got the toughness. I think he's got the stickability to be able to last the course in a 5-round fight, which you need to do against someone like Aldo.
Yep.
But I also think he's got that little X factor that he can finish fights. He can hurt you, and when he sees the chance, he wastes no time. He's straight in there. So great performance from Max Holloway. Walks away with the interim featherweight championship. Saves the UFC an enormous headache in doing that as well. And great performance from him. Jose Waldo.
Yeah.
Hashtag Jose Waldo. Amazing performance. And we now have our first confirmed championship fight of 2017. We just don't know when it's going to be yet. Holloway versus Aldo for all the marbles at UFC. Well, he wants it at UFC 208 in Brooklyn. The post-fight show is now live on BT Sport. Michael Bisping rocking a rascal shirt. I'm not sure about the tie, but rascal shirt from the man Bisping. where do we even start looking back on some of this stuff? Donald Cerrone, one of the knockouts of the year, perhaps?
Absolutely, that chin-to-chin head kick knockout of Matt Brown was certainly spectacular, and we talked about it a little bit earlier on. This has kind of capped off a stellar year for Cowboy, a comeback year of sorts. He moved to welterweight, like we said earlier, and he's just looked phenomenal. I think this is a weight class he should stick to now, moving forward, as he gets a little bit older, and he's in a position where he can actually make a run for that title. So a great performance by Cowboy Cerrone. I'm curious what we do with Cub Swanson now, Simon. I was kind of alluding to the idea of if Anthony Pettis had won this fight. We obviously know now in his post-fight interview that he doesn't intend to fight at featherweight again. The weight cut is just too much for him, so he's going to go back to lightweight, which is another ball ache in itself, I suppose, because his career is in utter limbo. I don't know what's there for him at lightweight. He's going to have to almost build him up from scratch again. But with Cub Swanson now, I mean, I'm looking at the featherweight rankings. You've got Jose Aldo and Max Holloway who are going to fight next for the unification title fight. You've got Frankie Edgar, who beat Cub Swanson not too long ago.
With 4 seconds to go.
With 4 seconds to go. You think Cub Swanson's in a position now, having won 3 in a row, to get a rematch there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the fight to make. The other one that you could potentially look at is Ricardo Lamas.
Yep.
But I think, given the level of that performance and the fact that Frankie needs a fight as well, I think the fight makes a lot of sense for both sides. I'd say get them in there. As I say, Frankie Edgar did win that last fight, won it by neck crank, but he literally won it with 4 seconds of the fight remaining. That fight could easily have gone to a decision. So certainly not a mismatch on paper. I would like to see that fight again. I think long-time fight fans who have enjoyed watching Frankie Edgar and Cub Swanson grace the octagon during their careers would like to watch that fight as well.
Yeah.
I think it's a good stylistic matchup, and that would make an excellent co-headline attraction on a pay-per-view or a main event. You could even bring that over to Europe, or you could have it on Fox in the US. I think that makes a lot of sense, that fight. That's the one I would certainly like. And just talking about people and their weight classes, and Anthony Pettis, I think, being very honest with himself, saying that he's going to need to move back to 155. What do we think about Kelvin Gastelum? Put in one of arguably the best performance of his UFC career to date, but he did it at 185 pounds, and he admitted he didn't have to cut any weight.
Yep.
And I think the fact he didn't have to cut any weight convinces him that he can still make it to 170. He looked great against Tim Kennedy, finished him by 3rd round TKO. But the call from certainly from my Twitter timeline and all the media members who we follow is, no, Kelvin, stay at 185. I think become more at home at 185. Really thicken up your body at 185. You could be an absolute beast in that division, Mr. Gastelum. I think it would be a mistake, because you only have to miss weight one more time, and you're in a lot of trouble with the UFC. I think he's been given another chance, and that other chance was at 185. And I think he needs to realise that. Look at the performance, assess it in a cold light of day alongside his other performances, and realise that a healthy, on weight Kelvin Gastelum fighting at a natural weight is going to be a major threat at 185 pounds, because I really do think in the next 2 or 3 years he could be a legit title contender.
Yeah, I think the UFC need to put their foot down on this one and not allow him to fight at 170 pounds, because he's missed weight too often, and it's just not fair on his opponents. You know, they're putting a lot of money into these camps, and they want to fight at a weight limit that they've obviously mutually agreed on. And for him to miss weight, Tim Kennedy, for example, had to move his entire camp forward in 6 weeks and change plans with family and bits and pieces, so it throws a massive spanner in the works. But that aside, he just needs to kind of understand, and I think it's clear to see he's fantastic at 185 pounds. And like you said, now if he can start working on the strength and conditioning and really manipulate and change his body to really suit that weight class, he'll get even better. I mean, looking at his performances and looking at the actual top 10 right now, I'd have no problem if you put him right in the mix and the thick of things, maybe against a Chris Weidman or maybe a Robert Whittaker. What do you think? Yeah,
I tweeted after the fight, I want to see him against Derek Brunson. I think that fight makes a lot of sense. I think given that he's only one fight into the division, I think throwing him in with Whittaker would be a little harsh on Whittaker.
Right.
Likewise, Weidman, I think you've got to fight your way to that level. I think a win over Derek Brunson would do that. I think Brunson needs a fight. He needs to fight against a relevant guy. Gastelum moving into the division and stopping Tim Kennedy makes him relevant. So I think the fight makes a lot of sense for both sides. That's the fight I would make next. I would make it as early as possible, just to try and keep that bandwagon rolling for Gastelum.
Yep.
And also to say to him, that's your division now. You want to compete in the UFC, we need to rely on you, and we need to rely on you at 185. If he wants any words of advice or any kind of case study in how moving up and fighting at a more natural weight can help, go talk to Anthony Rumble Johnson.
Yep.
Anthony Rumble Johnson basically dried himself out trying to fight at 170. Had trouble making 170, moved up to 185, even had trouble making 185, got cut by the UFC, went away. He was talking about it in his Q&A this week. He was doing a fan Q&A over there in Toronto, and he said he had a long train journey with Henry Hooft, his coach, and they said, let's just fight at our natural weight, shall we? Let's just give this a go. We can do this at 205. We think we can be a force at 205. They spent 8 hours talking about it on the plane, and the rest is history. He's now the most dangerous man in the world at 205 pounds, and arguably the most dangerous man in the UFC right now. That's because he's fighting at his natural weight class.
Yep.
I think Kelvin Gastelum can be a serious threat at 185. Fight at your natural weight class. And I think that's what we need to see in general. Donald Cerrone, exactly the same.
Yep.
Busting himself dry to make 155, and then when the going got really tough, he didn't really have the he didn't have the frame to deal with it because he was depleted. Looking at him today, fighting against Matt Brown, who's a big, strong, physical 170 pounder, he was able to compete on equal terms and eventually stopped him with a spectacular head kick. That's all the evidence Kelvin Gastelum needs. And I think it's a talking point coming out of this, but everything pales into insignificance when we look at, we spoke about Swanson just now, that Swanson-Doo Ho Choi fight. Let's talk about Doo Ho Choi for a second.
Yep.
Amazing performance in defeat. I love what he said in his post-fight interview, saying this is what losing feels like. I'm going to go away, train even more, and I'm not going to lose again. Love the mindset, love the approach, and he's an exciting fighter. And if anyone thought that Doo Ho Choi wasn't the real deal, even though he lost, they know differently now.
He might be a loser on paper tonight, Simon, but he's not a loser in the hearts and the minds of the MMA community. He got a standing ovation, as did Cub Swanson. I think everyone, if you're watching the card from your bed, from your couch, around the world, or whatever hour of night or morning it is, wherever you're listening to this podcast from right now even, you are applauding that fight with your mind, if not with your actual hands. It was just one of the most phenomenal performances we've ever seen. The heart and guts and determination from both men were phenomenal. I mean, for Swanson, it was a performance where he, reminded everyone that he's still got a lot to give. He's still learning and getting better as a mixed martial artist. He's not over the hill just yet. He's not done just yet. And for Doo Ho Choi, he's 25 years old. His nickname's Super Boy. I said Super Chin. The way he took some of those shots from Cub Swanson was like an absolute champ. The only thing that's a little unfortunate is he's going to have to do what the Korean zombie Chang Sung-jung just finished doing, and that's give 2 years of mandatory military service to South Korea. Which is incredible to think that we're going to be left without a Doo Ho Choi fight for a couple of years once that kicks in. But for the time being, I think he'll go back to the drawing board. He'll speak to his camp, his team, his head coaches, figure out what went wrong and where he can improve. He'll come back stronger and better from this experience. And again, for Swanson, it was just fantastic to see him roll back the years, so to speak, and dig deep and still give a strong showing for himself at the age that he is. But going back to Doo Ho Choi, he's an instant classic fighter. He isn't going anywhere. If you look at Dana White's timeline, he used a few expletives and said that was a fight of the year. I'm sure both men will be getting some fat bonus paychecks from the UFC, and when Doo Ho Choi does decide to return to the octagon and they matchmake him and book him in for another fight, he'll have a massive storyline, a lot of interest, a lot of headlines, a lot of media interest, and people are going to be really excited to see him fight again in the UFC.
Here we go then. We were talking about Cub Swanson, who he should fight next.
Yeah.
Who should Doo Ho Choi fight next?
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it?
Do you want to know who I want to see him fight next?
Go for it.
Yair Rodriguez.
Wow.
That's the fight I want to see next. I know Yair is not yet... Oh yeah, he is. He's top 10. He's just snuck into the top 10 there. Choi, he's technically 11th, but I still think... I think stylistically that's a superb fight. I'd love to see that. I also think Doo Ho Choi against anyone's going to be a good fight. Doo Ho Choi versus Henan Barao would be a fun fight as well. I think, depending on how you're going to pitch him, because Doo Ho Choi took a big jump to take on Cub Swanson there, 6 places above him in the rankings. But Henan Barao, Andre Fili maybe, if you want to go a little bit lower down the list. I think Yair Rodriguez would be an absolute barn burner of a fight. I'd love to see that. Now, we've talked about the main card. We've talked about those incredible matchups. Emil Met getting the decision winning the first fight on that main card against Jordan Meehan. The other 2 fights we do need to very quickly wrap up this thing with. Misha Serkinov, great submission finish of Nikita Krylov, and Lando Venata, amazingly on only the 3rd fight of the night, possibly stealing the show in terms of knockout of the night. I know Cerrone's head kick knockout was pretty special. Lando's wasn't too shabby either. Spinning wheel kick to put away John Makdessi. Who gets your knockout of the night bonus? Does he go to Cowboy? Does he go to Lando? Because Cowboy apparently after the fight said that he'd like to see Lando, who I believe is a teammate of his, get the bonus check. So it's a coin flip. What do you prefer? Thumping head kick or spectacular wheel kick?
I think the wheel kick, there's so much more technique required in pivoting and twisting your body and being so precise when that heel touches the chin or the face of your opponent. For me, it would be Lando Venata, but I think in time and time again we've seen the UFC favour the main card fighters when it comes to declaring who the bonus winners are. But yeah, you're right. I mean, Donald Cerrone did say he'd prefer Lando Venata to get it. So I suppose if Cerrone does get it, he could just pass the check over to Lando Venata if that's what he really wants.
Half and half.
Exactly. Misha Serkinov, great. Toronto's own. Getting a win there. And again, we spoke about it earlier on, but a welcome addition to the UFC 205 weight class. But it was just a great night of fight, Simon. I'm really glad that we had the opportunity to even be here at a venue like the Grosvenor Casino here in Russell Square. It was great to speak to some of the fans who were here as well, have a bit of an atmosphere watching the fights. Otherwise, it's usually kind of like in the darkness of my living room.
Waking up people.
Yeah, exactly. It was just it was great to be here at a venue here in London to watch the fights. It was great to use the Verdict MMA app to do the live scoring. That was a lot of fun.
That was good fun.
And we're going to be back here for UFC 207 on December 30th, which is the next kind of viewing party that the casino is going to be throwing. So for anyone that's listening that missed out on tonight, do keep a lookout on our social media timelines. We'll be throwing out the plug for the next event, and do come and join us on December 30th here at the casino.
It's going to be good fun. It's going to be good fun. I'll tell you what, they're going to have to go some to beat this.
Yeah.
This was one of those nights we're going to be. Where were you when you saw Doo Ho Choi fight Cub Swanson? Where were you when Donald Cerrone nearly kicked Matt Brown's head clean off his shoulders, and when Max Holloway became the interim featherweight champion of the world? Amazing night of fights. It's been a long night. It's coming around for 6:15 in the morning.
Yep.
As we wrap things up here in central London. Thank you very much for listening. Now we just have to wrap up with all of the usual business. You can subscribe You can do that via iTunes. If you do, please rate us, review us. You can get us on Acast. You can get us on Stitcher. You can also now get us on YouTube as well. So if you do any browsing and viewing of anything on YouTube, please do head for the channel and link us up. Subscribe. Go to the main website, thebritpackmma.com. All the available links will be there, as well as the live streaming podcast itself via SoundCloud. Twitter, Sandhu MMA. I'm getting tired now. At Simon Head, at the Brit Pack MMA. That is all we have. As a 20th show, that was a hell of a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to number 21, where we're going to be going back to the usual format, and then it'll only be a couple of weeks, and then it'll be UFC 207, more fun and games, Ronda Rousey making a long-awaited turn against Amanda Nunes. Here's a little thing, check out the promos for UFC 207 and play a little game of spot the footage of Ronda Rousey getting knocked out. You won't find it. Very, very interesting indeed. I'll leave that one with you. Enjoy the fights next time round, and we'll speak to you in a week's time.